This is how you take off the door trim panel to replace the speaker, or for whatever reason. The first thing you want to do is you want to take out all the stuff that's in here, water bottle and anything else like that. Then there's going to be 3 screws you need to take out. So the first screw is inside the door handle here. And then there's 2 screws inside this handle here, and that's all the screws you have to take out. Don't worry, all 3 of these screws are exactly the same, so don't worry about mixing them up. These screws, from my experience, the torque's pretty high, so you may need a drill. They're not hand tightened down. The thing you want to do is remove the plastic trim clip over here. It's held in by just a clip here, here and here. You can simply just pull it off or just clip around the edges. It's pretty straightforward to come off because it lips onto the edge of this. To undo those 2 screws in there, you have to unclip this thing. You just pull it up. You don't need a trim removal piece for this. You just pull it up. And then there's going to be a wire here. So the window connector on the driver's side door just has a little tab right there. You just have to push that in and then pull it out at the same time. The tab was on this side, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this side. We now need to remove the trim that's purely held in by clips. Now, I'd highly recommend investing in a pair of trim removal clips. These were a pack of 5 from Super Cheap Auto. I'm pretty sure somewhere like 20 bucks or something like that. Definitely a worthwhile investment. I'd highly recommend them. So I'm just going to probably start off with maybe this tool here and just clip all around the edges and just get them off. There's multiple clips around the edges as well as various clips inside behind here. And then do note that this trim seal here, this stays with the door. This trim seal will actually lift up and over the metal lip on the top. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Personally, when I like to take these panels off, I like to start somewhere generally down here because there's usually a gap here already, and I just get the gap here. I wedge my tool in and I just clip it off like that. Now, do be gentle, use 2 hands when you're doing this and just have a feel around because you don't want to break any of those clips. You can get replacement clips online, but it's just a hassle to do. So once you work your way around and undo all the clips around the edges, there's then going to still be clips on the inside. Then you just kind of have to feel around them, just pull them out, be a gentle persuasion with that. And then once those are out, you have to lift the entire panel up a bit to get the foam seal for the window here to come up and out. Once you've done that, you can now lift the entire door panel up now that you've unclipped all the inside ones, and it comes up and over. See, the foam trim sips over that lip like that. So you can see on the edge there, it just lips over the top. Don't take the rubber seal off because it is an absolute pain to put back on. And a handy tip, when you're storing these plastic door panels, remember they are plastic and they will scratch easily. So when you're storing them, put them maybe a towel underneath them. But luckily, in the back of the RegiusAce, there's plastic matting all on the inside, so you don't have to worry about scratching it or anything. But do be careful, don't put them on the ground on your driveway because it will scratch the plastic. Okay, and now the interesting part. To take the door speaker out, similar in the Toyota Corolla and other Toyota vehicles, you have to destroy the stock speaker in order to pull it out, because the size of this cutout here is a nice perfect circle to fit I think it's a 17 centimeter driver in it, because you see here they've riveted this plastic gasket into the thing, and otherwise you have to get a replacement gasket, which good luck to that. So the first thing to do to take these out is you have to take out this white plastic thing. This is simply glued on. I'm doing this with one hand right now. You don't need this, but I keep it anyway. And then you need oh, look at that, it's already come off. Either, if this doesn't come off already, just get a knife or a Stanley knife or something like that and just work away at the cone. But you see this glue here, if you pull it off by the edge of the cone with the glue, it gives you a really nice cut clean finish in the inside there. That looks like it was meant to be. Just work your way around. Poor old stock Toyota speakers. These speakers actually didn't sound too bad. They had quite a good amount of bass for stock speakers. But once those are out, you can see here, there are these plastic things acting as the speaker basket, holding the speaker in. And you also need to cut these 2 wires here. Don't worry about connecting or disconnecting the factory wiring harness. These will now become your soldering points or connection points to your aftermarket speaker. Now, luckily the plastic holding the basket in is pretty weak, so all I use is a pair of tin snips or wire cutters, whatever you want to call them. Even pliers will work, just to bend and snap the plastic off. So again, I'm doing this with one hand, but you just go in here and you just cut that off, and like, that's broken. Just, oh, look at that one snapped off anyway. Like that. Snip these wires. Because what we're going to do is we're just going to solder our positive and negative straight to those wires there. And look at that, now that your speaker's out, with a cute little magnet on it. And make sure on the back of your aftermarket speaker you've got foam on the edge of it. Here is an example of what foam on the back of the speaker looks like. It's just a simple bit of foam, just press fit onto it. I've also whacked a bit of foam on the front of it with some hot glue, just for the sake of keeping it nice and snug in there and to reduce vibrations, because when you're in a vehicle, anything and everything will vibrate. That is why all these wire harness and wiring looms here are covered with foam, because it vibrates and it resonates and it rattles and it sounds terrible. So where you can, put foam over everything, cushion it down, tape it down, get it nice and well secured. Over secure it if you must, over protect it, because in a vehicle things are different, alright, and you have to do things properly. Never ever rush things to do with vehicles, audio, engine, whatever. Never rush them, do them properly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go the extra step and I'm going to put some sound deadening foam in the back of it. I've cut out sound deadening foam about this much, 10 by 10 inch square. I'm just going to wedge it on the inside. Something you have to note is that the power window comes down to about here on this line here from memory. So just make sure that foam doesn't go up above here or up above the bottom of this cup holder. You also will need to take this cup holder out as well. I will show you that in a minute. Now that is only if you're running a component system where you have an aftermarket tweeter. Speaking of the aftermarket tweeter, I custom fabricated some tweeter brackets to mount my Alpine DD Linear Series component system tweeters on the plastic bracket that sits right there. That's why the previous shot that had me taking this off didn't actually have me taking it off, because I already did this and I forgot about it. You can actually see here, there's already a hole here. This hole leads down into the door. This is the only way to get from the outside of the door panel to the inside of the door panel at the top here. Now on the other side, on the passenger side, there is nothing in this hole, but on this side there is a plastic rubber thing. This is for the mirror support, which you can see mine's broken. I'm getting a replacement one. It's like 60 bucks on eBay, don't claim it on insurance. In order to get the wire from here down to here, you will need either something to fish the wire. Now you can use a coat hanger or a piece of thin metal wire. I'm just using this. This is just stuff you can get from your hardware store, and then you're basically just going to fish that down through that hole there all the way down. That's why we took this out, so we can get our hand in there and just grab that and pull it down. Then you want to pull it out through here, and then once you have the wire just hanging out through here and here, on one end of the wire you attach the actual speaker wire itself that's going to be connected down at the bottom here. And once you attach that, you just pull the thing through, which will pull the speaker wire. Where the wire is going to come down here, it's going to go around the back edge of the mirror assembly, finishes about down here. Then it will come around the back of it and out, and then it'll pop up. Take out this plastic cup thing. It's a bit finicky, so you need to unscrew these two screws here, and then you'll basically need to wedge the whole plastic thing in, because these clips do not come out. You'll need to wedge it in and pull it back and then under the clip, and then once that's out, you have to get it over this wiring harness here. Just get it over the top of it, and then do the same here, just push it out and wedge it out. It's a bit tough, it's pretty solid plastic, but it's possible. So I've taken those two screws out. By the way, these are the last two screws you need to take out from the door. Once you've done that out, then you lift this section of the plastic up and you put it over here. There is a foam thing on the edge, so it might be a bit stuck, just pull it off. Then you want to get two hands. You want to put a hand here and a hand here, and then you want to pull it down like this to get it under and over that clip like that. Once you've got it out of that, it's pretty much rinse and repeat for this side. So it just slips out, and then you can just pull it and it will just yank out. Don't move and don't rotate these plastic clips here, keep them where they are. And now that that plastic trim panel is off, we can then see the power mirror guide here. The mirror doesn't go all the way down that guide, it's a bit of an exaggeration probably from other models, but it comes down to like about there kind of thing. And that's where we're going to feed our wire through for the tweeter. Now if you're not doing a tweeter, you skip this entire step. Be wary of this power window here, and don't put it in the gap of where the power window is going to go up and down, otherwise it'll put pressure on your wire. It could damage the window motor, it could snap the wire. I was wondering how I made this tweeter bracket. Here's a few images of how I did it. So luckily on these tweeters, they've got a threaded hole screw in the back with the screw. So I just drilled a hole in the back of the plastic. I made the holes high as I possibly can so I can still get a screwdriver in there and screw the screw down. screwed it in and then made a second hole underneath it to thread the wires through. And the wires just come from underneath the tweeter into that. And that's how I mounted these tweeters. Pretty simple. It doesn't look the best, but it works just fine. Right, and that's if you're doing it on the passenger side, which I have already done. That's how I know how to do this. On the driver's side, this little plastic grommet here will probably prevent you from sticking a wire down there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pop the wire up through here, and then we're going to put a couple zip ties and bits of tape on this, and then it will just pop up through that little gap in the door. Remember, if you saw earlier, there was a little gap where the other trim panel sat over the top of that gap. That's where we're going to run the wire through for our tweeter. Alright, and so I can run the wire, what I've done is just temporarily just stuck this plastic panel back on. The wire's going to come down, kind of plan out where I'm going to attach it to, maybe along this, and then I'm just going to wedge it maybe under this. And then the other wire that has the crossover in it, that's the crossover there, this end goes to the back of the speaker that goes in here, and then this end is what attaches to these wires that go to the tweeter. What I've done with that is I've just put it through the hole, and then it's gone up behind this little metal bar here, this reinforcing bar. Now this is just to keep it out of the way of the power window when it goes up and down, so it doesn't get caught. Okay, and because these wires are going to be attached to this connection permanently, or basically permanently, and I'm going to put these in the door, and the door's going to go back together. I really don't want these wires to come apart or any water to get in them and corrode them. So I'm going to heat shrink the connectors together. I'm not going to bother soldering it because the connectors are probably already good enough. But just for that extra added layer of security, I'm going to heat shrink them. So on this particular speaker wire, it comes with these little rubber grommets that go over the top of these. So I can heat shrink them, I just push these rubber grommets down and out of the way. If you're having trouble getting these rubber grommets off, get a pair of long nose or needle nose pliers, grab the tip of the connector, and then once you grab the tip of the connector and you wedge it on the inside of the rubber grommet, you then just use the other hand and you just push the rubber grommet back down and out of the way. There's a little tip for you. I'm going to get some heat shrink. I'm going to put one on either side and then one bigger piece over the entire wire itself. Connect them and then shrink each side of the heat shrink down, and then get that bigger piece, slide it over the top just to make that one final firm connection over all these connectors. Alright, I've applied the heat shrink there, and then the final piece is just up here. I've just wedged it up here so it's out of the way. That's on both the wires. And Alpine has got some good engineering, and they've actually had genders on these connectors here, so positive and negative are connected correctly. If you don't know this, stop right now and get a multimeter or something like that, or just look at the black trace on one of the wires and go and check your polarity right now. Make sure it's all correct before you go any further. And because I slightly misjudged the length of the heat shrink, this one's got a correct length of heat shrink, on the one on the inside didn't, so then I just put one for both wires over the top of the whole thing, just so that it doesn't short up against the body of the car when it's inside the door. Alright, and now for the wire itself, I've just got some electrical tape and just taped it onto the existing wiring harness. And I know that taping it onto the foam here kind of makes the foam useless, but it'll be fine. You know, it'll be fine. It just kind of wedges in there, so then we just got to remember when we put that cup holder insert thing back on, we're just going to make sure that wire's just got a nice gap there to kind of sit in, and then all the extra wire comes out of here. Now with this extra wire, you don't just want to stuff it all in the door like that, no. What you want to do is you want to just roll it up, or just get it nice and bundled up, tape that bundle up, and then have it sitting nicely in the door. And ideally you want to tape it or secure it to some sort of surface on the car body, just so that it doesn't rattle around and just it's not loose, because we don't want that for the sake of vibrations of the engine and all that. Alright, and at this point in time we're actually getting close to putting a speaker into the speaker hole. So because we've cut the stock speaker out, the only way to really connect it to the wiring harness of the terminals is that we have to solder it. So at this point in time, I'd highly recommend, if you haven't already, get your soldering iron out, warm it up, and just turn it on, warm it up, get it ready to go for the next following steps. And now is a good time to stick the foam in, so I'm just going to wedge it all in there. Now it's in there, you just got to spread it out a bit. Get your hands in there and just try and get it nice and flat, spread out. Now a lot of people ask, what effect does sound dampening foam actually have on the performance of the speaker? Now this is a sound dampening foam, not cloth, or not that stuff you stick on. The stuff that you stick on is to isolate the sound. It stops the sound from getting out of the car, and it stops road noise and things from getting into the car. This stuff here, this sounds squishy, foamy stuff, this is for the effect of the frequency response of the speaker. So what this will do is this in a metal door can slightly reduce the sound of the metallic or boxiness that this door may produce. From my experience, it doesn't have any. But what it mainly does, if you put it in other loudspeakers and enclosures, it improves your mid-bass quality of the sound. So that's kind of maybe 100 hertz to 500 hertz. It just brings out a bit more of that. It smooths it out a bit in this. It can reduce a bit of honkiness as well in your woofers, lower mid-bass honkiness. It's hard to describe. But it's good practice to put it in. Now it's not the end of the world if you don't put it in. Your speakers are going to sound just fine without it. It just does that little bit extra to just help the mid-bass clarity sound a bit better for your speakers. And now with that extra speaker length, I've just bundled it up and attached it to here. Because it's semi-permanent / very permanent, I've gone ahead and done 3 full turns of electrical tape on this, just to make sure the tape doesn't come off or peel off in the heat. Because remember, again, it's a car, it gets hot, moisture gets into it, it might get water on it at some point, you know. The hot will melt the adhesive, so you want to get nice and firm, and a few rounds of tape around that. I was going to sit it in there because the acoustic foam is pushing up against it and giving it a nice solid cushioned spot. It's not going to go anywhere. And then here's the extra bit of slack I've left for the speaker connections on here. Right, so now you may be wondering, what polarity are the 2 wires? So there's multiple ways you can do this. Either one, you could take apart your entire dashboard and take out your head unit and then trace the wires with a multimeter or in continuity mode. Or there is a smarter way to do it. So, if you've installed your aftermarket head unit and you've got Bluetooth or something like that that you can connect to your phone, what you want to do is you want to turn your head unit on, connect it to your phone, and you're going to play a 50 Hertz sine wave. Just go to an online tone generator on your phone and play a 50 Hertz sine wave, turn off any high pass filters on your door speakers, and play that 50 Hertz sine wave, which will come out here. And something interesting is that if I probe it, right now, I'm at about 30-40% volume, 0.5 volts, right? That's in this configuration with the positive on top. If I swap it around, positive on the bottom, I now get 1.1 volts. So that tells me that the bottom one is positive and the top one is negative, because if I swap them around, the sine wave is going the opposite direction. Alright, it's actually getting inverted, and then this is registering as half a volt. So I put it the other direction, I'm getting a full volt, so that means I'm getting more power when I put the positive on the bottom. So there you go, the bottom one is the negative. If you're in a Toyota RegiusAce or whatever, and you've got these 2 wires, the blue is positive and the yellow is negative. There you go. Alright, now to solder it, you want to go ahead and tin your wires first. So I've just got a random length of speaker wire just used to connecting from the terminals to the speaker. You go ahead and tin those wires first, and then a little trick, see in the terminals here, there's a little gap right there and right in there, and you can just kind of push your tinned wires in there. They will slightly sit in there, and then that will just help you to just get the solder and the soldering iron and just solder it in there instead of having to have something to clip it onto it. There you go. And I've now soldered them onto it. It was very hard and it looks terrible, but it works. You just have to remember to apply some solder on the existing factory solder pads first, and then solder your tinned wire onto it afterwards, because it's quite difficult, but it's doable. Now, because I need to put the speaker and basically hold it here while soldering these wires on, I've just got a couple of cardboard boxes, stacked them on top of each other so that I can put your speaker right there, and then the wires just go right there, and then you don't have to have a bunch of slack wire. And also great to sit on while you do it, because it can take time. Alright, and with the wires soldered in the right polarity and the tweeter wires connected to the crossover network, we can then install the speaker. But before we install the speaker, I've just got it resting in the gasket there. We're just going to fire up the head unit and just check that it's all working, check that the speaker works, check that the tweeter works, and play a bit of music that has kind of 75 Hz, 70 Hz bass tones. That'll give you a good idea of whether it's in polarity or not. If it's really lacking that bass, then it's probably out of polarity. If you can, go to your head unit, flip the polarity, see if it sounds different with the software or digital polarity flip. If it does sound different and better, then well, you've got your wiring backwards. Alright, now the part of mounting the speaker in here is probably the dodgiest part of this entire tutorial. You can see on this particular speaker it's got a thing here, a hole there and a hole there. I'm going to use the hole at the bottom here to just screw it directly into the plastic here and just make new holes in the plastic, because that's the only way to really do it. And I don't have a bunch of matching screws, so I'm just going to go through a box of random screws and just find one that works. If you have a better way of doing this, do it. Don't take my advice. This is just the dodgiest part of this tutorial and it'll work, so yeah. And I've just got a bunch of screws and just screw them in the holes on all four corners. Always do all four corners, don't just do two, alright? Just do the whole thing. The good way to test if it's in is move it, and if the entire door moves, then the speaker's in there nice and good. And now we have to put it all back together. So first things first, we have to do the cup holder inserts, minding the wire that we've wedged through here. In order to put this thing back in, what you do is you put this side in first, then you put the cover underneath the other side of the wiring harness. Now there's a little plastic thing on the inside just here that you have to just pop over to the other side of the door trim. And then once you do that, then you do the same thing and you just pull it back and just wedge it in there. It takes time, be gentle, be patient, and you'll get it in. And we've installed the cup thing now. We just had to kind of wedge it like that and then just slide it under the little edges of the tab here. Screw it back in. The wire is just wedged quite snugly in there. Probably could have a bit more slack if I were you, but I can't be bothered. So now we can put the door trim back on, and before we do that we have to take this off again, and this can just dangle here because this goes on after we put the door trim back on. Now remember, putting the door trim back on, the first thing you do is you get the foam thing, you lip it over the top and it just sits on top. Once it's sitting on top of that, go along and just push in, and you see how that in there is kind of on a bit of a curve. You just get a finger or something in there and just flatten it out. Same on this side, which is pretty good already. And then just go along and push all the clips in. Remember the clips on the inside as well. And then take a little wiring connector out of a little pocket here. Something I've noticed on this side, there is a clip that is actually not attached to the door. It's actually got stuck in the frame. So if that happens, you have to take out the white clip that's stuck in the door frame, and then just click it back into the plastic on here, and then it will click back in. There's only one that's doing it, so I'm not really going to worry about taking the whole thing off again and doing it. But yeah, then you just get the window uppy downy thing, plug that back in, and then just click this over the top by lining up the 3 clips there. Here's a little tip for you. Now that we have this thing out that's loose, it is a good time to clean it. So you see how in the pocket there's all that dirt and grime? While it's out of here and it's easy to handle and work with, you may as well just get maybe a wet cloth or something there, or even just spray it down with water and just clean it out. Alright, I've just cleaned out the inside of that real quick, and put the connector back in, click it in, and then put the screws back in. I did use a drill to put them back in. Just be very careful not to over tighten these because you will crack the plastic. Be very gentle. I'd highly recommend just doing it by hand. Same with this screw here. And finally, after all of that, you can put this final piece of plastic back in, and then there you go. You've got a little tweeter just hanging out. Fully upgraded audio system. And if you liked this video, be sure to subscribe and comment. If anything was different or you think anything was incorrect in this video, do leave a comment down below and I will pay attention to it and make changes necessary. But if this helped you with either your RegiusAce, your HiAce, or your Toyota Commuter, do let me know, because I'd like to know what other models this video would work for, as well as what other years. So have a great day, and happy modifying your sound system.